so here's what kind of the next hour is going to be. This is kind of the roadmap, the future casting, and we have an interesting mix of folks. We've got 3 manufacturers and a couple of integrators, and we're going to talk about where you guys kind of see the industry, both from a technological standpoint as well as a business standpoint. So I'm going to have everybody kind of introduce themselves from my right over here to Rashid. So Mr. Durkee, if you could introduce yourself first.
My name is Steve Durkee. I was the president of commercial at Milestone. I'm now the senior vice president and general manager of commercial at Legrand because we got acquired. So apparently our name tags still, we haven't figured out who we are. We still got the wrong names, but which manages the chief Vadio daylight projecta business for that team.
All right, very good. Right,
okay, hi there. My name is Girish Narayanan, and I represent a company called Resurgent in India and as well as Grantech in the Middle East. We are basically system integrators.
My name is Kelly McCarthy. I am the chairman of Genesis Integration because we ran out of titles for people at the top of the food chain. We operate.
So are you at the top of the food chain? Is that the deal?
Well, I'm fighting for it.
Okay.
We're across Canada. We are in AV Integration. We have a wholly owned subsidiary that does broadcast work, and yes, we like poutine up there.
I'm Steve Alexander. I'm with AVNex. I'm the director of sales. Previous to that, I spent about 10 years each with AMX and Crestron.
All right, very good. And Rashid?
And I'm Rashid Scaff. I'm the president and CEO of Biamp. Been there for 81 days. And been in the industry for about 16, 17 years.
Do you have a counter on your desk?
I do.
81?
Yeah.
82's tomorrow?
It is.
All right, very good. Rashid, we'll start with you. Let's talk about technology first and what technologies are kind of out front and center. One of the things that in talking with some of your folks about the purchase of Biamp, because Rashid kind of made light of the fact that he's been there 81 days. Highland Partners, which is where you were, purchased Biamp. One of the things in that announcement was, and what we've got, at least from the press, from your people as well as from your clients, is the excitement, right? So what do you guys see kind of in the near future, I guess?
Yeah, I think in the near future, we're super excited about the ability to take this platform, which is really what Biamp is, and to build on it, both organically and through acquisitions. So our goal is to double the company and then double it again. And so the momentum and velocity has to gain speed here for us. And in that, the excitement about this industry is certainly there, right? There's so much opportunity and so much growth potential in this industry that we all have to capture our unfair share of.
I like that phrase. Steve, what do you guys see as the technologies that have to be addressed right now as far as integration?
Well, you're seeing some really rapid changes in the marketplace. A lot of people are moving towards unified collaboration platforms, kind of away from hard endpoints. And the types of rooms that you see with the highest density, especially out where we are in the Silicon Valley area, moving away from more highly integrated 8 and 12 person conference rooms towards huddle spaces, right, with a different kind of requirement for technology, different kind of spatial requirements, right? There's not too many 19-inch racks anymore in most of the spaces where you want to do work, other than training rooms or EPCs. So you need to be prepared to respond to that, as well as all the good things that that end user panel just said about helping them be forward-looking with technology.
No. Kelly, Steve mentioned the move to UC and the move to kind of the cloud platform. How do you see that, and how does that change the role of the integrator if we're moving to the cloud and getting rid of or lessening the impact of racks and actual equipment?
Well, I think for a long time, when we talked about technology, we were always talking about a hardware piece and changes. And I'm a gearhead, so I love the gear. I love hooking it up and playing with it and stuff. So, that always.
See, here you insulted the gear.
Done.
Yeah. Maybe we should call tech support and you should move on.
Is there an AV person in the house? The handheld next to me.
Okay.
Hand that down to him, please.
Sorry, I think I'm good. That's what happens
Did you
when
turn it off?
It magically turned off in my pocket.
Magically turned off.
The same thing my customers say.
Just like
it always
exactly.
does this.
And the code never worked.
Yes. Anyways, we've always been about the gear and the hardware and the changes in that, and I've gotten very jaded with that over the years because the industry, and nothing against our PVP partners or anybody, but our business has a tendency to beta test things in the field. And as we go from projects to customers, I really don't want to put my customers through that. I want to make sure that the technology is solid before we go to that. So as we're moving into cloud services and Internet of Things, I think that initially everybody was in this kind of scramble to get there and try and didn't quite know how to be there, didn't know when to jump off. I think the idea of moving very slowly and methodically and understanding what it is that we're getting into, because it is not wires and equipment and just straight programming, is a really important piece right now. It's to very carefully research an entire life cycle of a cloud video service or of any kind of managed service piece, right? So,
okay, real quickly, because I want to circle back on what you said, and then we'll continue on. You said that the industry, and all due respect to the manufacturers, sometimes they beta test in the field. If somebody brings you a brand new piece of equipment hot off the line, and you don't want to put it into your next project, then what do you do with it?
We call our competitors, how many failures they've had with it. I'm not going to touch anything anymore.
Kelly McCarthy, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, we're very remiss. It's the old adage, the pioneer gets the arrows, right? And I really don't want my customer to be that pioneer, but at the same time, we want to be forward thinking in what it is that we're doing. So we've got to be very careful in our testing processes and things like that. I think that if you heard from this panel, prior to us, they want to make sure that what they're getting from their integrators is very solid solutions, because they have people to answer to, right? And if we're going to answer to our customers, we'd better do a much better job of testing products in the field. I see on social media the amount of banter there is back and forth with these massive failures, and of course the manufacturer says, well, you're the only guys that's failing on, until of course we show up at Infocom and everyone's like, yeah, me too, I had that same problem, right? So I think that the idea of product testing, I mean, I wish we could get the manufacturers to do more of it, but it's incumbent on us to take care of that so that we're taking care of our customers in advance.
All right. Girish, as far as what technology do we need to address right here and now, or at least in the next 6 months?
Well, from the emerging markets that I see and I work with, I see a lot of Internet of Things, smart cities that are being deployed that makes everybody's life easier. So adopting into new technologies, and I see in our part of the world, governments adopting the technology earlier, which typically doesn't exist because governments are the last in the chain to adopt technology. So a lot to do with retail technology as well.
Well, speaking of retail, because is there more move to AI or the immersive technology like augmented reality, where somebody comes into a retail space and they can see themselves in a new suit or what have you? Are you seeing more of that, or is it more the Internet of Things interconnectivity?
So it's actually a mix of both. There's an augmented reality that's now being deployed across retail stores. So these technologies are already available, and you see them being adopted in the retail chains, because what we have seen is something called as Figital. So it's more physical and digital.
Okay.
Okay. So we walk into the store, we want to buy a pair of suit or a dress or a shoe. You have a display up in front. You put your leg in, and you see them across the screens change the colors and stuff like that. So something like a Figital. So what retailers are looking at is really to draw the maximum footfall into their retail stores, and because online is one of the biggest threat, right? So everybody now likes to click it and get them ordered. So these are new ways of engaging customers.
Well, it's also an interactive way where the retail store can add value more so than an online experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So yeah, you find them everywhere. So typically we from an AV integration experience have actually used that skill sets to find new ways of engaging with markets that are emerging.
Yeah.
Okay, like for example, using augmented reality into STEM-based learning, right? So these are technologies that we get K-12 students to come in. To think of these kids playing super high-end resolution games, and then you walk into a classroom, and all you see is just an interactive screen or a board. It doesn't excite them anymore. So so this kind of augmented reality, which is now part of this kind of learning, is getting a lot of attraction.
Mr. Durkee, from kind of your vantage point, now being a part of Legrand, which is a global company, not that Milestone wasn't, but you have a few more companies under your belt. Where do you see, what do you see from a technology standpoint?
Well, first I'd like to go on record say I'm generally against less rack spaces with Middle Atlantic as part of our AV division.
And Chief.
So just want to make sure I put that out there. But from a technology perspective, I'd say it's an interesting discussion because I see sort of two things that we get questions about a lot. But certainly Legrand as a company has something called Elliot, which is a whole Internet of Things initiative to interconnect the technologies across the company. And I'm sure everybody in here, so if you're not working on it, everything over IP is a trend. There are new technologies to figure out how to send all of this stuff we create for content over IP, over existing networks, and deal with the fact that they're not going to repipe whole buildings and those sorts of things. So I encourage people to sort of do that investigation. We're starting to do some of that work, and how do we create a lot of data that needs to go over pipes that weren't really built for that. And so there's technologies, I think, emerging from that. If you aren't building out your service offerings, and I would call that a technology, whatever that software you're creating or your service benchmarks to be able to sell the services that are involved. But it creates the other side of the technology gap that I think is an interesting thing for us to solve as an industry is, so you get that request. I've sat in meetings now where people are like, they want it simple, but could it recognize my face and could it tell me that they're secure? I'm like, Wi-Fi can't even stay connected. How is this possible that you're going to make this? So we hear about standardization, I hear about globalization, I hear about simple, but then the next voice or the next word is all about all this stuff they want it to do. So I think there's that side of the technology making it simple, and there's that other side where we're going to have to deal with that more complicated. So it's that's where we can fit, I think, in that process.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, everything has to go over the network, and we've been on a long journey to get here. And Internet of Things will certainly bring the cost down of the components to make those pipes cheaper. But at the end of the day, if we look at the trends that are really happening, it's artificial intelligence that we're seeing today, as well as machine learning. So the ability to walk into a room and have it sort of utilize that space in a way that's natural for the people walking into it is no different than when you type something into your browser today and it finds all of the requests that you have. And so I think that the whole machine learning piece of this is going to be absolutely key. I've always found it fascinating as an industry that we kind of come in late into the game of the whole equation, yet we're part of the second largest expense of any organization, which is real estate. I mean, after people, real estate is the most expensive part, and we're supposed to make the spaces that we're in more efficient for people to use. So ultimately, we should be very proud of what we do and make sure that we understand the usability of those spaces and the functionality of those spaces, which manufacturers like us have to figure out how to do with machine learning and other things. So I think that's going to be a trend that we see more and more of in the next 10 years.
Yeah.
I would just like to make a point. We're all friends, right? If you compete against us in the Bay Area, don't listen too hard. Kelly made a great point about new technology. Rashid's also talking about new technology. You heard all these panelists before talking about wanting to be integrated into what's new. Well, challenge is opportunity. What you need to do is go get your manufacturers with whatever cutting edge technology your client has identified. This is something they want to test drive, and go build a POC, right? Go build an offline room inside their facility.
Real quickly, I have a rule. You have to define what the POC is.
Proof of concept.
There you go.
Right, so you want to say to everybody, give us your vision about what your next level meeting room is. And if you want to do, if you want your cell phone to be recognized, we'll experiment around with that and show you how easy or hard it really is. And then you're now married to this entity, right? You're discovering together, you're asking questions together, and you're not learning to shave on their face, right? Because you kind of segregate everything into a safe space, right, where you can test things, and that's all part of becoming closer to that end user.
I am pulling so many quotes out of this. It's not even funny. I've never heard learning to shave on your face. I love that. Rashid, I want to come back to what you said about machine learning. You made the comment that it's on the manufacturers to figure out how to integrate and use the machine learning to make it easier and more intuitive. What to integrators?
Well, I should probably specify
Yeah.
that it's up to the manufacturers to incorporate the machine learning into our systems. It's up to the integrators to understand how to take that information and make use of it, right?
Well, that's going to be my question: is how do they do that, right? How do you take, a programmer who's been, doing one or two, control languages for the last 10 or 15 years of their life,
Yep.
and take them and say, okay, now you have to figure out what this machine learning is all about and integrate it.
Yeah, actually, if you've been a programmer for the last 10 or 15 years of your life, this is a great time to be alive, I think, because ultimately the machine learning and bringing all this information together is something that is done in code today by very smart programmers. In the future, those will all become variables that will become available to the programmer to do something with. And ultimately, our goal and our functionality as an industry is to make these spaces and these environments about the experiences that you're trying to have. Whether that's just dialing a phone. I heard earlier, the concept of it's easier for me to dial my phone than it is to walk into a conference room and make a phone call. That's a problem.
That's a huge
It's
problem.
not a problem for a manufacturer or for an integrator or for a channel or anything. It's a problem for all of us. All of us have to make it so that this is something that people want to use and walk in and naturally are able to use. That's where I think machine learning will help. And ultimately, the very smart programmers that are there, this is nothing but upside and nothing but opportunity in the future.
All right, very good. Mr. Durkee, actually, I want to take the same kind of question, though, is as we're talking about this move to the next technology and interactivity and machine learning, what can manufacturers do, or how would you advise your clients, the integrators, to take their existing workforce and educate them, right? Whether they're a programmer or they're an engineer, what do they need to learn and how do they learn it?
Yeah, I think I'll start with the first part of the question. As a manufacturer, the thing that we've been focused on is giving this room access to the data.
Okay.
There's a lot of stuff we collect that isn't necessarily available. So we focused right now. That has been our focus on making, whether it be power supplies or cameras or whatever. What data is available? We've been making that data available, and then interfaces for them to use in order to access the data from there. Now we haven't. One of the things of being Legrand is an opportunity to pull a lot of that together with potentially software packages that talk to those things. So that's the future. We don't have that currently tying all of our pieces together. We're just starting to make the interconnects consistent and available to our partners so they can use. So that's been our focus right now.
Real quickly, the data you're making available, you're making it in a consumable form, or you're just giving them raw data?
We're making it in a little of both, but we're making a lot more of it in a consumable form. We have our own tools that let you talk to our products,
Okay.
and so we're giving access to a lot more information that we normally didn't think was important. Why is that important? Well, I'm getting asked for everything that you have available. Let us decide what's important, and we're focused on that first right now.
All right, good. Girish, from your workforce standpoint, how are you guys ramping them up and getting your men and women in your company up to the next level and educating them?
Yeah, so this is one of the biggest challenges that we face, because technology is changing very, very dynamically. So one of the things that we do is we constantly train our people with each and every manufacturer that we work with on a regular basis. So the training is the biggest integral part of our system, because I think that actually gives us the edge and the advantage to represent the manufacturers in each of their territory. Yeah.
All right, Kelly, same kind of question. And is the manufacturer training, or is there something outside of that they need to learn?
Well, I think in our business we have, it.
We see if it moves around with the mic, or
Yeah,
I don't know.
it seems to be working again. Sorry, I'll hold on to this so it's like.
I'm going to make a loop of you just saying sorry, just so you know.
Yeah, well, so I think we've become accustomed to training our staff and realizing that that's a competitive advantage that we have, and it's pretty well baked in. If you want to survive, you've got to train your people. But I think that some of the things that kind of concern me, or things that, when I think about training and I think about the future, I'm thinking about, we have this demographic gap. So, a majority of the people, as I can see by looking around the room here, are in this business are white males that are over 50 years old. And we're not catching up fast enough. We're not growing enough, in this gap. So we're having trouble getting young people to do the work that we need to get done. And, what are we doing about that? What are we doing? Another thing we've kind of brushed on it a few times, but, cybersecurity, there's going to come a time in the not too distant future when you're not going to be able to walk in and put anything on the network. And everything that we have eventually is going to be an appliance that sits on the network. So you want to be in the business, you better understand cybersecurity, right? What are we doing about training our people about those things? Internet of Things, we talk about it, and it's this buzzword, kind of like services was 5 years ago or 8 years ago. But what does Internet of Things mean? Do people understand how are we going to get power to the space that today has 100 Internet of Things devices? In 2 years from now, we'll have 1,200 Internet of Things devices. What are we doing about getting power? What research and what training are we doing with our people to understand those things? I think when, the things that keep me up at night are not, whether or not I have 25 master programmers on staff. It's more about how are we going to deal with cybersecurity when someone says, no, you're not putting anything on my network. That's the day that scares me.
Yeah.
I was just going to add on to that. As you think about, so we don't offer necessarily courses in programming, those sorts of things, but two things on the training side. One is, I think one of the things the manufacturers can do, and we're trying to work on, is provide content, sort of like case studies, but on steroids, about stuff that you can actually use with end customers that talk about what solutions can look like, instead of just here's a piece of hardware and here's a bunch of feeds and speeds that go with that. And then something that is a little harder to do because you're all here, so you come to this event, but is carve out some budget and time for your team members to go to a cybersecurity. Although everyone I've been to scares the hell out of me, but you go to you carve out time and money to send people. We send people to product management training and marketing training and engineering, and not all of them are good, but you got to actually carve out some time to go see some of these things. And I think it's something you can do right away to get your team some exposure to that.
Yeah. Steve, what are you guys doing to help make sure that the next generation or your current generation is educated?
So two things, right? First, the gentleman on the panel before that gave the David Lee Roth example.
Yes.
If you really listen to that, there was a lot there, right? We are very proud that in the Bay Area we've got more certifications than any of our competitors, because customers look to that now, right? That was an informed buying decision wrapped inside a little entertaining anecdote, right? And you want to pay attention to customers who are being more discretionary, and one of the ways that you can identify yourself to them is by having more training, even if not all of it is 100% applicable to what we're trying to do. The other thing is, if you look at all these control platforms and things in general, everybody's moving towards, Python or C# or whatever. And the idea is, I'll just go get a bunch of kids coming out of school. This also addresses the we're all old issue. I'll just go get a bunch of kids coming out of school and it'll be great. The problem is, I tried to hire a bunch of kids fresh out of school and they all said, what? No. I've got much bigger aspirations for me. I'm going to be mixing the board for the next big pop album, or I'm going to be writing video games. Come on, man. So we need to find a way to drive our kind of homebrew programmers who kind of grew up as usually lead techs who showed some aptitude and know some kind of specialty control system or other types of DSP programming languages. We need to find a way to grow them, or we need to do a better job looking cool. Because let me tell you, when I sit across from 20, 18-year-old kids, we don't look cool. Maybe we need a better suit.
Because we're all old, according to Kelly.
Well, he's right. He's right.
I think that what everybody has said, I think, is very applicable, because what this is all about is, at the end of the day, it's software-based architecture, right? And if you understand software and the concept of where the world is going, whether it's the network or whether it's security or whether it's a manageability platform. How do you deploy, maintain, and upgrade systems that are in the field to create a user experience that people are looking for? And that's all software-based technologies today. And I think we shouldn't, I'm neither old nor uncool, so I think we're going to be great at building great solutions here for our customers ultimately, and build great businesses out of it.
I got to add to that, though. This is my AVIXA plug a little bit. The AVIXA has spent a lot of time talking about creating amazing experiences, and it's probably a different panel, but I did get a chance to see a company in Canada. Just their titles were different. Experience creators and productivity and just things that younger people didn't want to be in. I want to be an AV person. No, I want to create experiences, great experience. So even they started being creative with the titles and they were really empowering them. Like, you need to go show these people how to run meetings, not how to create the technology. And it just gave it was a whole different vibe. This office was doing AV integration, but it was it looked like a Google office. It just had a different vibe. So but they were having the same trouble of attracting young talent to the AV industry. So there's things we could do, a different panel probably, but
Yeah.
That's a concern that I have in general. Like when you're talking about that, is I don't believe that we're going to get swamped by the next iPod or Uber or whatever. That's not my concern. My concern is with the demographics, there's this vacuum. And the vacuum gets filled by somebody who's innovative, and it's maybe somebody who's young and new. And while we're in here discussing the thread weave on a buggy whip, Ford is building cars down the road. And that's my concern, right?
Well, that's actually a really good segue into our next topic. Voice control. Speaking of Ford, building a car down the road. A year and a half ago, I was at CEDIA, and Amazon exhibited there for the first time. They had Alexa, and they had several different control companies that were, showing their wares. And again, CEDIA is a residential show, absolutely, that's 100%. But I looked at that, and I actually wrote a couple of pieces, and I said this, on our show a couple of times, that there's going to come a time when commercial integrators are going to have that question asked to them.
Right now.
Okay.
We've got a client who wants it right now. In our position, and it's a consultant-driven project, so somebody's told them, look, you're driving a Ford, and I'm going to show you what a Tesla is.
Yep.
Right? But what we need to do is manage the customer to say, well, this all sounds great, but if you give a verbal command on this side and it comes across on the other side and controls their room, is that a problem? Maybe. Right? So you want to embrace new things, it kind of circling back to what I said earlier. You want to show them this is possible, but you also want to have, some belt and suspenders, good old-fashioned touchscreens or, iOS control so that they can touch some buttons and actually make their meeting work. Companies, especially progressive companies, always want to be on the cutting edge of how they sell and collaborate, right? So they're always interested in what's new. And what we don't want to be is the nannies who say no, right? But you need to be intelligent about the way that you go about it, right? You need to make sure that whatever control platform that you're choosing, that they're aware of what's going on and that they've got skin in the game, right? You got a consultant, you need to make sure that they're taking responsibility, which is sometimes hard, but that they're taking responsibility for the end product of what they've recommended to the client. And you need to educate the client about what's practical, what's possible, and you don't want to say no, but you want to say yes in a way that's responsible.
Makes sense. Kelly and Girish will finish this conversation, and we'll get the manufacturer.
So on the voice control, it's very interesting that you tell, because by the end of last year, we deployed about 8 or 10 rooms for a leading hospitality group in our region. So the issues that the customers, what they asked us is, Alexa is not a very, very popular name in our regions, right? Can you change that name to something else? So that was not possible. So things that we learned quickly is HDMI. If you said HDMI, it's not able to recognize that. So you got to pick source 1, source 2. So we learned a lot, and one of the best things that we have done with it, we have even integrated butler services into the voice command.
Yep.
So you can just call for a coffee or a croissant, and you get that delivered. So these are some high-tech integration that we have done.
Kelly?
I'm not worried about it because none of them speak Canadian, so it's not really an issue for me.
Hang on for a second. To Kelly's point, Genesis is a Canadian company. They just, in the last 6 months, started shipping it to Canada. The first rollout was in North America. Second rollout was in England, which still didn't make a whole lot of sense to me. The fact that they still did not ship to Canada up until 6 months ago. And yes, there are issues with accents, let's say.
Well, we've got English on the West Coast, French on the East Coast, and Fringlish in the middle. So,
Fringlish.
So that can be a challenge, but it's a natural evolution, right? I read
Is it natural, though?
It is a natural evolution. I'll tell you what. This gets back to the DVD player, which was April of 1997. I think that was one of the first products. I'd read this somewhere, so this isn't my fact. That it was the first product that was brought to market from the sort of the AV space that wasn't actually conceived in the pro market and then adapted into the consumer market. And from that point forward, in the pro space, we've been playing catch up to what's going on in the consumer space, right? So if the consumers are using these products at home, they're going to come to the office and they're going to go, we want it, period. Well, I mean, it's no different than the church. I mean, we were doing churches years ago, which was, I'm still here, I didn't get hit by lightning. But the churches were all about, we need better sound, we need better video, because at home it sounds so good and it looks so good. Why can't I have that in the church?
Yeah. Can I just quickly respond to that? I've got Alexa in my place, right? And I use it to control the lights and some other things. And it works about 85% of the time, which at home is great, right? I've got a guest, I want to say, watch this. Hey, Alexa, dim the lights or play the music. They're impressed and it's fun. Right? When I've got a meeting going on and I've got my shareholders on the line, 85% accuracy doesn't meet the threshold. No. Right? So your point's very well made about consumer and pro, but there's a different level of expectation in those two arenas. Right? When something is fun and it's kind of a novelty thing, but it's absolutely a powerful utility. And Alexa's a great product. I have it in my house because I think it's cool and it's great. But that doesn't mean that I would want to have the tip of my business spear be powered exclusively by Alexa, right? Because I've got a different threshold of acceptable, operational time between those two different portions of my life.
Right? I think the CEOs of the world are going to push. They're going to push us in the industry to move that way, because they're going to want the simplicity. Too many of them have come to a meeting room and they can't get the thing going. It's like, I just want to talk to the thing and have it work, right? I can do it at home. Why can't I do it here? I understand, but what we're starting to talk about now is the technical challenges that they don't care about. They just want it done.
All right, so
what I tell them is, look, when you plug in the HDMI, it'll just work.
Here's actually where we were bringing the manufacturers, and follow me for a second, both Rashid and Steve. 10 years ago or so, the consumer device, the Apple TV, gave folks the ability to wirelessly send video in their home, right? If I had an iPad, if I had an iPhone or a Mac, I could send wirelessly video to a display. Back then, I was a technology manager at a college, and I remember very vividly our president coming in and saying, I can do this at my house, I want to be able to do it here. So armies of technology managers and integrators started purchasing these $100 stupid pucks and putting them into conference rooms and into education facilities until somebody came along and gave us a better solution. Mm-hmm. So Rashid, what can manufacturers do that is a better solution than the Alexa? The voice control is overarching. Yes, we all use Alexa as kind of the Kleenex of voice control, but it's not just about Amazon. There are other options out there.
Sure. Yeah, so selfishly, I love anything to do with audio. Yeah. So whether it's in or out of the system, and I know a little bit about control, I would say that the piece that will come from most manufacturers is to incorporate that concept into products that specifically meet the requirements of the spaces that we're in. Okay. So many of our products come out, and Kelly said, right, it comes out of the kind of the consumer space that have generated a lot of interest. We've got to understand how to use that space. The iPad came out and the iPhone and the computer and so on. So I went from carrying one device, my phone, to now carrying 3 devices. So it didn't really help me to consolidate. I can do all the same things on all 3 devices, but I use them for different purposes. They solve different problems in my life, and that's what we do as an industry. We solve people's problems. And so how do we make sure that we take this voice technology, or any technology, but voice as one option in that chain, and incorporate it so that it solves the problem? I do agree that this is not the nirvana of the world, because ultimately, when you're in the middle of a meeting and you're trying to control the lights and people are talking and everything else, there are other things to it. But directional mics sounds like a good company to invest in, or any kind of solution sets where you can pick up people's voices in very specific ways are actually key to the future.
Yeah. Steve, same kind of question.
Yeah, so first I'm going to have Rashid put those in big rack space boxes. Huge.
Huge.
As big as you can make them. So I think the challenge for me is I don't know that our goal should be to force I don't know, call it a consumer trend onto the commercial. The note I heard that was interesting was, you just need it to work. So if it's what enables us to create a better experience, then great, let's use voice technology. But I don't see it as our role to say, hey, we're going to make a new voice one so that because we hear about it. I'd like to know we're doing it so that it creates a better experience. And I haven't seen that yet, but do I believe it'll be there? It will be at some point. I don't think that that's a question. It's I don't know that we need to push it, because there's still a lot of work to make sure the room works every time, every day. That has nothing to do with voice control. I think if you actually got that right first, you could then build off of that technology.
Good point.
All right. Now we're going to move on to a little bit more business talk here. There have been a number of mergers and acquisitions over the last couple of years in this industry. A couple of them on this stage. 81 days, apparently. So, Rashid, we'll start with you. How much more consolidation are we going to see in the AV industry, both from an integrator standpoint and a manufacturer standpoint?
I think a lot. I mean, certainly that's our intent as a company, is to consolidate as much as we can. But I think it's equally true on the integrator side. We're seeing that with a few of you in the room, acquiring other entities, bringing them together, or relationships like this with PSNI, where you're working together as an association, if you will, or a group. This is a sign of any maturing industry, is when you start getting to a mature stage, so we can honestly say that we're into our 50s, maybe into our 40s is probably the more appropriate piece. We're out of those young years when it was wild and so on, and getting into a more structured way of doing it. So I think you're going to see a lot more of it on all fronts.
Okay. Steve?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, we've been through it this year, and I know Rashid was involved in some of the things we were looking at a few years ago. But certainly the private equity money that's available, which is a lot, sees the AV industry has an attractive characteristics. It's got good growth characteristics. It's maturing. They see opportunities to put capital to work in good ways. So I would fully expect to see more money come into the industry. And then from an integrator perspective, you guys are living it, but that there's an ownership transition that we're living through in a lot of integrators that started this business 25 years ago and now are ready to do something different if they could. And so I think that it's going to happen on the manufacturer side maybe for a little different reason, because it's attractive space to put money. And on the integrator side, I just think that it's the maturity of the industry is creating a situation where people are ready to find some liquidity in their life's work.
Girish, where do you see the mergers and acquisitions going?
Well, yeah, definitely it's moving into that direction. A week ago, we were all in Amsterdam, and we went for a meeting at Rotterdam, and we found large companies, financial houses acquiring big integrators. And the whole idea behind this is what Kelly has been talking about earlier, is, buy the expertise and use them to go to market with AV as a service, right? So these are the mergers and acquisitions that is happening. And even in this room, I know my colleagues from Brazil, 2 companies merged together to be more powerful in the market. So this is definitely the trend, and I see this happening more and more.
Yeah. Kelly, you have some experience with this.
Yeah, I think that we're kind of in a perfect storm in the industry right now, and it's all of these things that were discussed. There's private equity money. There's the ability to grow. You end up with more leverage with manufacturers in terms of buying power. We're buying, in a lot of cases, talent, footprint. We've got an aging industry, so you've got people who are looking to exit who might not really have an exit plan. And the business that we're in is, at the same time all this is going on, the business that we're in is growing exponentially. So we've got, a number of years ago, pardon me, we had a very limited group of people that could afford very expensive work that we did. And now what's happened is video and collaboration and digital science, a lot of the things that we're doing are becoming ubiquitous. They're strategic initiatives, they're mission critical, they're must-haves, and they're being massively accepted. So, if you want to be in business, you want to be competitive, you're going to have some kind of collaboration strategy or information strategy with digital signage and things. So that's driving that's just fuel in the fire. So I think we're going to continue to see the roll-ups. I think we're going to continue to see companies both on the manufacturer side and on the integrator side continue to roll up into larger entities.
Okay. Steve?
I look at it a little bit differently. I really like big customers, right? Because they can give you a lot of money. And the biggest customers typically have operations in EMEA and Asia Pac, right? And if they're buying a typical PSNI integrated type of solution, that could become very complicated, right? How am I going to get the same interface, the same source code? How am I people going to be, able to communicate across all of this time and distance effectively? If I've got to knit together a bunch of little systems integrators, the complexity is high. Right, the chances for failure are high, right? So what they're looking for is a single partner that they can go to that can say, hey, I can handle you worldwide, right? Or else they're just going to look at a catalog, put their finger on a picture from Cisco or Polycom, and we're not going to make any money, right? So I think of it as being existential to a certain extent, right? In so much as our friends at Biamp and Legrand, they're not making any money off of that Cisco purchase either. Right, and I would argue, I'm not just strictly a money grubber, the client's not being as well served, right? They're not getting a solution that's custom tailored, right? So we as an industry, we need to be able to say, hey, enterprise company, I can, the sun never sets on my capability to support you, right? With a consistent, engineered forward to back system, right? And that's what we've got to do, or else we risk being irrelevant with our most important customers.
Yeah. Steve, I want to come up what you said about private equity money and the aging out and the retirement, right, of what has traditionally been small businesses, right, mom and pop. A gentleman started, throwing speakers up in his garage at one point 30 years ago, and now suddenly he's making $100 million a year doing AV. When they sell to a private equity or a manufacturer goes from being privately held to being held by someone who has a different end goal, right? Let's be frank about what this, investment firms, they want to make money. There's nothing wrong with that. But their end goal is to go from $100 to $200 in X number of years. How does that change the nature of the AV industry?
Well, it can be good and bad. You can get the short-term nature of that process, but I think right now it can be good. I mean, they invest capital, they force you to think through some of these things in a good way. I think what I would tell people is understand that when you get a new investor, they're already got an exit plan. So you should, because they're in it for 3 to 5. I mean, there's a window for a private investor. Now, we're in a different, Legrand's a public company. That was a different deal for us, but so they've got one. Just be clear on what it is so that you don't end up you don't want to be in a conflict halfway through that process. But our experience with at least our partners on the private capital side has been positive. I mean, I'm not worried about the reputation of private equity being brutal and all that. There's a lot of really good people out there. There's a lot of capital put to work, and in general, they want to help make your business better. Just understand for a window of time they do, and then they're going to go on to something else. That's about the only piece you need to recognize.
All right. Rashid?
Yeah, no, I think Steve is 100% right. You got to go in with the right expectations. For a year after I left my last company, I worked with over a dozen different private equity groups, looking at things, including Steve's former private equity investors. And one of the things I found very, very quickly is, just like business and life in general, who do you want to work with and who don't you want to work with?
Okay.
And I think the same thing applies for private equity. My private equity group that I'm a part of and that bought Biam is really a family office. It's really one guy. And so they have no time. They don't have the 3 to 5 year time frame that you got to go through. Other private equity groups have limited partners, and so you know wherever you are in that cycle or that fund, you have whatever time left you have in that fund to do something and then get out because somebody else will own it. It's not a bad thing. I mean, God bless America. That's why I moved here. People want to make money. That's a great thing. Let's not say that that's bad. The reality is you got to understand what it is that you're trying to achieve with your business, and do you want to stay in it? Do you want to have some part ownership of it? Do you want to be completely out? Those are all questions, and the right partners help you decide that. Okay.
Steve, I want you to take it from the integration standpoint and how those relationships change when you have a relationship with a manufacturer, and then the next day, they may or may not be owned by a private equity firm or somebody who has a 3-year plan. How does that change your relationships?
So I've been through a lot of this, right? I was at AMX when we first went public, and I've been through several different acquisitions and changes with people on the producer side. To be perfectly candid, right? Financial people have financial goals, right? And Rashid did a pretty good job of explaining that in a way you don't have to be scared of it, but you do need to understand that they've got financial goals.
Yeah.
Right. And
just so it's been said, the small business owners also have financial goals.
Exactly.
They're just different.
they're expressed in a different way, right? Somebody might be looking to build equity through a balance sheet, and that's a year-over-year slow process. Typically, publicly traded entities or people that are interested in growing something and realizing capital from it work on a 90-day clock, right? And I've spent a lot of time on a 90-day clock, and you learn that you have to balance both long and short-term priorities, right? And it's easy to get too focused on one of those things, right? I've seen people that spend way too much of their day looking at what their stock option price is going to be, right? And not getting the work that needs to be done. But on the second side, businesses have to be managed to be profitable and to have longevity. So it really is a balancing act. And really, I'll echo what these guys said. You have to talk to people and say, look, I understand what your goals are. Here's what my needs are,
yeah.
right? And things need to flow both ways.
All right, Mr. McCarthy, how does this change the nature of just your business and relationships, whether that's with other integrators that have gone to private equity or manufacturers?
Well, I may be a little bit different in that, I haven't had a lot of experience with the private equity or venture capital or a lot of that. I came into this business, I had a blue mohawk, I was a guitar player, I was not, that's how I got in.
Do you have pictures of that?
Yeah, but you're not getting them. I didn't come into the business with an MBA, so as we grow and as we amalgamate, or acquire companies or whatever, what it's forcing us to do is become more disciplined financially. And I think that, when you start out your business, very often you're a lifestyle business, right? And, there's tax advantages, there's all kinds of reasons why you get into business in the first place, besides just, loving to do the business that you do. But I think that as you move up the food chain, get larger, as you invite in capital, it requires you to become more disciplined. And I think that's probably the biggest change or the biggest difference that I would see with us if we were going to invite private equity.
All right. Girish, you have the last word on this.
Well, yeah. So you're right. We basically have a bunch of passionate people who started the business. And like what Kelly said, we neither have any exposure to private equity firms or venture capitalists. So it was basically a bunch of guys who decided to start something. So yeah, technically, there's a lot more funding that we would require as a company to grow. While we address emerging markets. So I'm sure there are companies which are looking to invest and to buy smaller companies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, guys, as we end up here, Durkee, we'll start with you. In a minute or less, where do you see the AV industry in the next 2 years?
Well, first, just to wrap up on the capital thing,
Yeah.
I think as an AV industry, we talk about AV and IT and where we fit and all that stuff. I think the more capital we can get into our industry, the better off we're going to be as an industry, because it'll drive innovation, it'll drive technology. So I would encourage all of us to see that as a real opportunity that people want to invest. I think we've talked about some of the trends. I think the number one thing I think I heard about, and PSNI is on it, at ISE was people are ready to go global. And it's not that we weren't ready to go global, it was that the enterprise customers are starting to think about the discipline necessary internally to go global. So, and that's not for everybody. That's why people, when they do acquisition, they have to be careful. I think that someone wrote that article about going niche or going big or whatever it might be, but that's real. I think there can be great businesses and being niche and being expert in signage or education or whatever, but certainly going global is a trend that I think is taking root and is gonna impact our business and drive all sorts of things. But it's real, and it seems like it was really, I think, integrators were ready, but the end users weren't, and they seem to be ready, I think, now. So that's one trend I think is going to see.
Okay. Girish?
So I think building expertise onto certain vertical markets, that would be a leading point as well. As we work from an emerging market, so our market is not as regulated as some of the developed countries, right? So what we expect to do is to work into certain verticals. Like what we have done is we have diversified ourselves into telemedicine and things like that. And yes, I think our industry also requires, I completely agree with him, that we need a lot of capital influx into this to drive innovation.
All right, Kelly, where do you see us in the next maybe 12 months, 2 years?
Well, to build on what Girish is saying is, I think that probably we're going to see our core competencies in a lot of ways change. We're going to be core competencies are going to move towards network. We're going to be appliances on the network, and we're going to be subject matter experts in IoT. So, if it's digital signage or if it's collaboration or whatever it happens to be. And I think that the ecosystem, we're already there, is the network, and we're going to have to find our place in there because there's a battle that's going on right now. And I think for us, the trick is to find, where we land and what our space is there.
All right, Steve?
Gosh, if you want a prediction, I would predict that within the next 2 years, a national reputation IT VAR will buy a national footprint AV integrator and attempt to, craft an AV practice through a national IT VAR, and that will be a struggle.
Interesting. Okay. Rashid, you have the last word on this.
Well, it's always nice to be last. So I would say that the biggest thing that we will continue in the next 2 years, and we feel like 2 years is a long time, but it really is a blink of an eye in the grand scheme of things, is we will continue our journey onto the network. Even today, as we all sit here, a very small portion of what we produce is over the network. Some of that's because of manufacturers' costs, and IoT will certainly help with that. But if we look out a little bit further than that, I just want to remind everybody that software-based architectures are going to define this, and how you interact with that and how the experiences that you build off of that will become key to our long-term success. We have to make it a joy and an easy experience to walk into whatever experience that you're trying to do. And Steve told me to make sure that I reminded everybody that everything we do has to go into a rack. So as long as we're
and they make these nifty ones that
That'd be
can
great.
have displays now too. So.
those are fine too.
Lots of
We're not
displays,
old
lots
and
of
we're
stuff
hip.
to go on.
We're not old and we're
My
hip.
immaturity keeps me young.
Over 50. Barely over 40-ish. All right, gentlemen, thank you so much. Rashid, Steve, Kelly, Girish, and Steve again. Ladies and gentlemen, you give them a round of applause.